Looks like we've got a great crowd night. Thanks so much for coming to this webinar put on collaboration between CFR Education from the Council on Foreign Relations and Retro Report. We are so excited to have all of you here tonight as we talk about understanding U.S. China relations through history and film. Um, so let's dive right in. My name is Charlie Hopkins. I'm the Managing Director of Teaching and Learning here at the Council on Foreign Relations.
That's all. That's all the intro you're going to
Yeah.
give yourself, Charlie?
You want me to
There's
say more? I can say
there's so
more.
much more to say.
All right.
Joining Charlie this evening, I'm David Olson. I'm the Director of Education at Retro Report. It's wonderful to see a number of friendly faces in the group tonight, along with some new folks. I know for organizations like mine and like Charlie's, it is wonderful to connect with teachers who know us well, and also great to find some teachers who are finding us for the first time. So thank you very much for joining us. And our goal for the evening is that you'll leave here tonight with not only a greater understanding of U.S. China relations and how to incorporate that in your classroom, but probably most importantly, that you leave with some ready to use classroom resources that are free and adaptable and usable across, whatever courses you're teaching. So,
Yeah,
Charlie, take it away.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And furthermore, probably coming to us more familiar with one organization or the other, and we hope you'll learn a bit more about the other one and check it out and see how it can help you. Um, just a couple quick pieces of housekeeping. We will have some time for questions at the end. If you'd like to ask a question, whenever it occurs to you, stick it in that Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom. It'll hold on to it and we'll get to it towards the end of the hour. Also, we collected your email address when you signed up, and so you will get an email from us tomorrow. We'll have links to everything we talked about tonight, links to the slides, and there will be a survey giving us some feedback on how we did, what you thought of what we talked about. If you would like a certificate saying that you were here for an hour, be sure that you fill out that survey. And one of the questions is, please send me a certificate, and you will get a certificate later this week. Um, that does anything for you, for your bosses, for your state, we are happy to provide. All right, well, let's dive in. We'll talk a bit about CFR Education, what we have to offer about China. Hand things over to Dave. He will show you a bit of a film, which is hot off the presses, published today, I believe. And then we'll have a chance for some questions and discussion towards the end of the hour. But before we dive too far in, I just thought we'd take a quick moment. Why are we talking about U.S.-China relations? I think there's a lot of answers to this. David's film is about particularly Nixon going to China. So this is a key moment in US history courses. It's obviously a big question in world history courses as well. US-China relationship over the last 75 years or so, and the Communist Party's been in power, has shaped us so much of what has gone on in history around the world. There's a big economics angle here too. I think the rise of China, the growth of the economy, the relationship between the US and Chinese economies is a great fit for economics. And although this week seems to be largely about Ukraine, we know from the campaign that the Trump administration has a lot of thoughts about China, and some of them are different from the previous administration. And so I think we're going to see a lot of China in the news and coming up as current events. So it's always great to think about what kind of context can we offer. Um, David, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on why we should be teaching about U.S.-China relations.
I mean, I think you did a great job, Charlie. I think this is timely. It's also historic. It fits, across a ton of different disciplines. One of the things I'm loving about seeing folks in the chat introducing where they are, what they teach. This is not only relevant to places all across this country, but I see folks who are joining us from other countries and folks who teach Asian history or Chinese language and culture and things like that. And I think there are, as you said, multiple entry points where finding some information and some great resources can help us all be better global citizens, along with being more skilled and prepared educators.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thanks, David. So just a couple quick words about CFR Education as an organization. We are the educational arm of the Council on Foreign Relations. And been getting this question a lot this week. We are not part of the government. We are an independent, nonpartisan think tank. We're over 100 years old. Been doing the nonpartisan thing for over a century. And the goal of CFR Education is to support educators teaching about the fundamentals of foreign affairs. Um, and we do that through learning resources, readings, videos, and things, webinars, professional development, teaching resources. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Most importantly, all of our stuff is free, completely free, and expert informed. We work with the researchers, the fellows, the Council on Foreign Relations, to take their research and use it to to explain the fundamentals of global affairs. We have a lot about history, a lot about foreign policy, and that comes through as readings, as videos. We have timelines, interactives, charts, all kinds of different formats. Most of it pretty bite-sized, so really designed to fit into your curriculum where you have a space. It's not going to take over your whole week or your whole month, but bite-sized pieces to help out build your students' understanding. Um, we have a great simulation program. We invite students to step into the roles of decision makers about the U.S. National Security Council or the UN Security Council. This graphic, by the way, I did not pick it just for this meeting. This is the graphic we use every time we have a webinar. And it just so happens that our simulation about China is very popular. Even when I'm not doing a webinar about China, it's one of the most popular ones. That's the one we use as an example. We'll talk more about those simulations later. And we also, we have all these readings to give to your students, videos to show your students, simulations to run with your students, but we also have teaching resources for you. We have lesson plans and activities, sample essay and discussion questions that you can grab and adapt and use for your own needs. With curriculum alignment pages. So if you're teaching an AP course, an IB course, you're just going through history and you'd love to have stuff, sorted by century or by decade. We have pages for that to help you find what you need for your particular unit, your particular point in history. If you're working off state standards, we have state standards search. And then last, we have professional development. We have events just like tonight. I'm also going to take half a moment up on the top right here. You can see, I'm going to plug this time next week. We are talking about geography using CFR education resources. So if that's of interest to you or you have a colleague who teaches geography, come on back. Same time, same place next week. You can go to our website and get the link to sign up. All right. So let's dive into what we have on China and U.S. China relations. I think one of our best pieces, if you just want students to understand like what's going on in China, they're communists, how they get to be communists, like what's the background. Um, this piece is great. How does history inform the Chinese Communist Party domestic and foreign policy goals? The big mouthful of a title, and it covers a lot of ground. And I'm just going to click through and have you guys look over my shoulder while we read it a little bit. Um, so you can see, we count this both as contemporary history, but also it talks about democracy. Um, and we always try to start off with something that's going to grab students' attention. In this case, a somewhat recent film that kind of gives some insight into how China sees itself. And then you see we've organized this into parts. So again, if you don't have the time to assign this whole reading and you just want to assign one part of it because that's what you're focused on, easy to do. We go back a little bit, look at the Qing Dynasty, what China calls the century of humiliation, when it was sort of subject to imperial powers. But we also have great graphs to show, China was still pretty prosperous, even though they didn't have a lot of geopolitical power at the time. Um, Graphs showing the changing size of the Qing dynasty, which ruled, in much of the 19th century. Talk about the Opium Wars, great graphics from this one's from the Boxer Rebellion. Um, and then the communists who fought against tracing that long march. I'll also point out, you'll see some words along the way have this dotted underline. That's our glossary function. So students don't know what a word means, and they're not sure exactly what Civil War means in this context. Then click on it and get a definition right there. Keep reading. Anyway, we talk about World War II, and then we continue on into the Chinese Communist Party in power. And this is basically the story of Mao. Talk about the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution, and then the Chinese Dream. What are they trying to do today? Again, don't know what sovereignty means? Give it a click. There's your definition. Taking a look at economic growth, I think this is a great graph. So clear what's the story of China in the last few decades. I mean, wow. uh, Very famous picture I'm sure you've seen before, but again, giving students some context for if they've maybe seen that picture and how does it all fit together. And again, trying to connect it to students' lives today is a great conversation to be had here, about all the websites students maybe are used to using and, how that might be different if they lived in China. Um, and then this picture has not loaded. Well, if it had loaded, you could see it's one of those sliders. You can see Shanghai as a city before and after. Um, and it goes from sort of like couple short buildings to skyscrapers cheek by jowl next to each other. Um, must be my home internet is having a bad day here. Talk about this is a great map about a really complex question about who has control over the South China Sea, and so on. So that's an example of one of our readings. Um, and but we also, I mentioned at the top, our simulations. And we'll see some conversation about Taiwan in David's video. And so I wanted to highlight this particular simulation. The great thing about them is they hit all of those skills that I know social studies teachers are focused on: critical thinking, persuasive speaking and writing, collaboration among your students. They got to work together to solve some of these challenges. Um, and so let's take a look. All of our simulations are designed, right? We have a quick overview and what are our learning goals. So you can take a quick look and see is, hey, are these learning goals that you know, are interested in trying to hit in your classroom? We have what we call the situation, which gives some background. This is us trying to explain the evolution of Taiwan and China and their relationship between each other in, 500 words or so. Um, but help students understand, it's China sees it as a renegade province, Taiwan sees themselves as an independent country, the U.S. has a one China policy, um, and then we come to what we call the decision point, and this is what is the issue in front of students, and in this case, this one is designed to be, a plausible near future event, right? U.S. intelligence suggests that China's preparing for an invasion. I wouldn't say it's that close and that strong in real life today, but might open a newspaper in a few years and this could be completely true. Um, and students have to advise the president. Um, what should the U.S. do? Should it do nothing and signal that they're going to stay on the sidelines? Should they impose economic and diplomatic sanctions? And again, if you don't know what a sanction is, click on it. Students can find out really quickly. Or do you send in military troops to get ready to defend Taiwan? And this is sort of laying out this question. The US has long had this position, what they call strategic ambiguity. They don't really want to let on what they're going to do if China attacks Taiwan. And so this simulation is designed to force students to say, look, we've reached the point where you got to make a decision. And it's too late to still be ambiguous. So what's your decision? By giving multiple options, it's designed so that students have to really weigh different choices, discuss, what are the pros and cons of each, and we lay out in these policy options, like, why might this be a good idea, but also what are some of the drawbacks? Um, and then students have to discuss. You as the teacher can pretend to be the president, make them advise you. You could make, one or a couple of students play the role of the president and they ask questions and really dig into it, and can create really great discussions. If you want some more guidance about how exactly to structure that conversation, you can click here on view guidelines. We have some ideas. But also, if you've got a great classroom discussion protocol that works for you, just drop this into that. And it's a great discussion point. We also have additional resources. So we have some opinion pieces taking different contrasting positions, and then some additional background if that's something that you and your students are interested in. Um, so Great opportunity. And again, this is not that long. You could do this in a class period for sure. Maybe assign the reading for homework the night before, come into class, have a great discussion, that fills just one class period, and students have a really deep understanding of, what are some of the issues around U.S. policy towards China and what to do about Taiwan. The last thing that I'll point out, as I mentioned, we are the educational arm of the Council on Foreign Relations. We write our stuff with a high school and college audience in mind, but we are also a think tank publisher membership organization. And the think tank has just recently launched an initiative, what they call the China Strategy Initiative. We have fellows who are really focused on China, doing programs about China, and foreign affairs relating to China. Um, so here's just a couple of the sort of questions and programs that are launching in the next few months. So if you as an instructor, if you're doing a whole class about China, or you're just really interested in what's going on, it's a great way to inform yourself. I'm also really excited about this open source observatory. They're going to translate and digitize documents, from Chinese. I haven't seen a whole lot yet, but it's coming, and that could be some great opportunities for some primary source analysis. You and your students are interested in what's going on in China and U.S. China relations. So all these are really interesting options. And finally, if you go to our website, this is just the beginning. If you head to education.cfr.org, put China in the search bar. These are some of sort of the most on the nose ones, but we have a bunch of other resources. We have a great one about how Chinese censorship is shaping the movie industry, because China's become such an important foreign market for films. Um, so, like, why don't we see a lot of ghost stories? Well, because the Chinese don't like ghosts, and they censor those stories. So, a lot of films, the big films don't have ghost story elements to them. It's a Confucian thing, I understand. And then, we also have a lot of articles. For example, we have, what is the WTO and how does it work? It's about that. But there's a good section that has quite a bit to say about China, because that's an important part of how the WTO has evolved over time. So lots of different topics that cover China to a greater or lesser extent. A whole bit about the Belt and Road Initiative. So go check it out. Our search tool. If you haven't been to our website in a while, we relaunched the website last year. New search tool. It's fantastic, and will really help you find what you need. Couple of final thoughts. This sounds interesting to you. Uh, Please feel free to sign up for our newsletter. You can just hit that QR code and give us your email address. We send one message a week. We will not share it with other people. We will not sell it to someone who wants to sell you extra insurance for your car. But just sending you relevant resources, interesting lesson plans, that we hope will be helpful in your classroom. And we're on social media, which is also a great way to follow along with what we're up to, what's new, what we're publishing these days. And if you have questions, any number of ways to reach us, but also, our email address is right there on the right. We'd love to hear from teachers. Either questions, hey, do you have this thing? Or, feedback, either, hey, I did that simulation, it was really great, or hey, I did that simulation and didn't go great, and this was the issue. What do you suggest? Love talking to teachers about those kinds of things. So please feel free to reach out through any of those means. All right. So let's watch a movie. I'm going to disconnect, stop sharing my screen, and hand things over to David. And again, if you have questions, stick them in that Q&A function, and we'll both be back towards the end of the hour, and we'll do our best to answer what we can. So over to
I
you,
mean,
David.
to be fair, Charlie, you're not going anywhere. You're here. You're remaining here. Yes, thank you, Charlie. Again, it's always wonderful to work with CFR Education. Charlie does a great job. His team, Rania, who I don't know, might be somewhere out there in the internet. Logan, who's also here. Really fantastic humans who work for an organization that does a lot of great work for teachers. So hopefully now I get to tell you about another organization that does good work for teachers. As we take a look here, one thing to note, this chunk of the presentation, which we'll share the link with you in the email that you'll get after this as well. But the whole presentation I have is in Google Slides and open for you, or if you want to copy it down, the RR, CFR are all capitalized. Um, but yeah, so we'll let's see what's new from Retro Report. And when I say new, I mean hot off the presses, like published within the last couple hours. I told my folks we had a deadline to hit, and by golly, we hit it. So the first thing to know is all of the resources I'm going to share with you are entirely free. Retro Report has a huge library of great short form documentaries, which I'll show you, and I'll show you how to navigate that. Um, to see all of those resources, all of the films, you very easily can just go to retroreport.org and see our whole library. To see all of our classroom resources, and I'll show you the brand new lesson that goes with the new film I'll show you tonight. Those are also freely available. They are somewhat recently, within the last 6-8 months or so, behind a registration wall. We do that for a couple reasons, primarily so that we sort of have a separation between what teachers are seeing on our site and, if you send students to, any of our video pages to watch one of the films, they're not seeing the classroom resources. We're also working on building in some new features that will allow teachers to sort of curate their playlist, save things so that when you come back to it next semester or next year, some of those favorites are still there for you, along with some other things. So if you're not yet registered on the Retro Report site, you can either scan this QR code, or I did put the link directly in the chat there as well. It takes less than a minute. We'd love to get you signed up and connected there. So if you're unfamiliar with Retro Report, if you're coming to us for the first time here, like CFR Education, I haven't had to answer too many questions, Charlie, about whether we are part of the government, but we also are not. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan journalism organization. I work with a group of extremely talented journalists and filmmakers who are focused on creating short form documentary films. And the way that we try to approach our filmmaking is by connecting past and present. I was a long-time social studies teacher, spent most of my career as a high school teacher. I'm still teaching now. I'm teaching a course at UW-Madison this spring. One of the things I think is most important for students is being able to see those connections between history and the present, right? If you've seen me at a conference presentation, one of the things I'd like to say is, social studies teachers, we don't come in second too often, but there is one place, it's to math teachers, and it's the number of times we hear, why do I need to know this? When am I ever going to use this information? I think we have a much better answer to that question. I like to tell people, including, good friend of mine who I coach tennis with, who's a math teacher, I have not used calculus since my senior year of high school, but I use social studies, I use history, geography, psychology, civics every single day. So I think it's really important. And what we try to do is bridge those two. So what we have to offer is a library of about 300 films, all of which are entirely free on our website. And then, as I'll show you tonight, a growing collection of lessons, student activities. We have some great interactive resources, and we're working on building that out as well. And really spanning the majority of the social studies courses you're going to teach, but also things that fit in well with English and ELA courses, science, especially environmental science, sort of all down the line. And why you might want to use Retro Report, I mean, I'll let you be the judge. I'm going to show you a snippet of our newest film tonight. I think what we do well is find engaging stories to tell, important moments from history, and find ways to connect it to the present. But we also let the interviewees do the talking and sort of drive the narrative. One of the things I'll show you tonight, or the film that I'll show you tonight, we have an interview with a man named Winston Lord, who for a period in the 80s was the U.S. ambassador to China. He is also the I think one of the last living person who was in the room when Nixon met with Chairman Mao. So somebody who is living history and can talk about that moment in time from a first person perspective, which is not always something you can get. Like I said, the price is right on our resources. We've got great videos, great activities. Our films are short. The one I'm going to show you tonight, I'm going to show you about a 3-minute chunk, but in total, it's about 9.5 minutes. So it fits well to be integrated as part of a lesson, something you want to use to, begin a discussion, to begin a simulation, to get an overview of this moment and this time frame in history. And we also go through a rigorous fact-checking process to make sure that everything we're putting out there in our films we can stand behind. So let's take a look. So this is the film, like I said, brand new, released today, called How Nixon's 1972 China Visit Set the Stage for Today's Tensions Over Taiwan. We are not great at short and concise titles, but it tells you what it's about. So let's watch a clip, and then I'll show you the lesson and the activity, how to find things on our website, all of that.
It was one of the boldest foreign policy decisions in modern history.
This was the week that changed the world.
Richard Nixon's 1972 trip to China shocked the world and left a consequential legacy.
I think one of the greatest diplomatic achievements for the United States under 8 or 9 presidents of both parties has been our Taiwan and China policy.
So how did we get to the point where it seems to be threatening to unravel?
Soaring tensions between China and the U.S. as China ramps up a massive show of force near Taiwan.
The decisions made in the 1970s by Nixon and his successors created the possibility that we would face a crisis over Taiwan.
In the midst of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, the United States and Communist China were bitter enemies.
We had been at war in Korea. We had no contact. There was a great anti-communist feeling in the United States generally, and many people felt the Chinese were even more unpredictable and dangerous than the Russians.
So it came as a surprise when President Richard Nixon flew to China in 1972 to pay that regime a visit.
As the first American president ever to visit China, President Nixon is met by Prime Minister Zhou Enlai.
Nixon went sightseeing.
This is a great wall, and that it had to be built by a great people.
And visited a ballet. And dined with his communist hosts.
American people were shocked to see Nixon dining in the Great Hall of the People and toasting his Chinese hosts. The Chinese had been painted for so many years as evil communists.
It was a huge reversal for Richard Nixon in particular.
Nixon's a fascinating character in this story because his initial appearance on the national stage is as a really deep hawk on communism.
The only answer to communism is a massive offensive for freedom.
So for him then to go from that starting point to meeting with Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai, it's such a dramatic shift over his career.
He'd have told me that I would be sitting in the Great Hall of the People in Peking, China, clinking glasses with Zhou Enlai while the People's Liberation Army band played Home on the Range. I would have said, "You're out of your ever-loving mind."
It was all an effort to forge a powerful, if unlikely, new alliance against the Soviet Union.
Nixon saw the Soviet Union as the greatest threat to U.S. interests around the world. If he could find other countries that would undercut the Soviet Union's position and influence, that would be a win for the United States.
There was no assurance that a presidential visit to China was going to be a success.
Winston Lord and his boss, National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger, joined Nixon in a meeting with China's leader, Mao Zedong. They knew that one issue could derail negotiations.
Taiwan was clearly the most sensitive and divisive issue between us. We knew we had to talk about that issue.
For more than 20 years, the United States had supported Mao's main rival, Chiang Kai-shek, who had been driven from power and exiled in Taiwan.
All right, like I said, you just get a taste tonight. So You should go watch the rest of it. There's some additional great tidbits in there. There's a point in time in the 1970s where the U.S. sort of shifts under Jimmy Carter to effectively, not recognize Taiwan as it establishes full diplomatic relations with China. There's then a backlash in Congress, which gets us to our policy that we have today towards Taiwan. Having watched this now a couple times, I think one of my biggest questions is, I wonder how much practice Nixon had to have with the chopsticks. Because I mean, knowing what we know about Nixon, you know that he was not going to go to China and look foolish on camera, knowing, I mean, there's going to be video cameras, plenty of film cameras happening. I'm guessing he got plenty of chopsticks practice because, I mean, in the early 1970s, Chinese food in America was not nearly as mainstream as it is today. So good. I'm glad to see in the chat there's some other people who agree with me here. All right, so let's take a look, and I can show you how you can find this and plenty of other resources at Retro Report. So if you go to retroreport.org, this is our homepage. The easiest way to find all of our resources is to click right up here where it says Explore by Topic, although we often do have right in this top spot here sort of our newest film that we've released. So obviously this one is here and ready to go. But if we click on Explore by Topic, it will bring us to the full video library. These are organized essentially in order that they've been released. So our newest film here, the two that came right before this a couple weeks ago. This one is great, especially teachers if you're looking to teach about World War II. This one talks about how racial propaganda was used by the Germans and the Japanese sort of against the United States. We have this issue of lynching and segregation and Jim Crow, and how essentially that was used as a weapon by our foreign adversaries. We can search here by subject. You can click by topic. There's plenty of different topics to explore, or you can put in a title, a keyword, a name, any of that sort of thing. If you click on the video thumbnail here, it'll bring you to the video page. As you scroll down, you'll find a short write-up. In this spot right here where it says for teachers, if you don't have your account created or you're not logged in, right here what you'll see is a banner that says sign up for a free account to see all of our classroom resources. But when you are signed in, this is where you can find our full transcript. One of the things I really like about our transcript is we cite our sources. So whenever we're using archival footage, it will tell you where that archival footage is from. It'll tell you who's talking, all of those sorts of things. And then we've got the lesson plan here. And if you keep scrolling down, you'll find that as well. You can click on these, which we'll do in a moment. But here on all of our video pages that have lessons, you can click on these little drop-down carrots for objectives, for essential questions, all of those sorts of things. If you click on these, the lesson plan, this is the teacher-facing document. So this is what courses might I use this for? How long is it going to take? What are my students actually going to do as part of this activity? And then the student activity, as the name would suggest, this is the student-facing document. So this is what you would go and make a copy of and then either print out or share electronically with your students. We create all of our resources like this in Google Docs because we want it to be as easy as possible for educators to use. I spent way too many hours of my life as a teacher trying to recreate, almost good enough stuff to use in my classroom. You'd find something excellent and go, I don't like that question, or there's some vocabulary in there that my students aren't going to get. I need to change this up. We wanted to avoid all of that, so we create them in Google Docs. Go click on File, make a copy, and then make whatever adjustments you'd like to the materials. What you'll find pretty much from all Retro Report lessons and activities that go with our films are, some questions that go specifically with the film. So you can find those here. This also sort of gets students ready to talk about these issues by going over some key vocabulary: diplomacy, regime, alliance, exile, those sorts of things. And then actually somewhat similar to what the Council on Foreign Relations has, although I think ours little quicker and not quite as in depth as the CFR Education one. It asks students to envision a scenario where China is ready to invade Taiwan. Students are given sort of a number of different actions. We've provided some great background readings here, including a couple from the Council on Foreign Relations, because they absolutely are, a leader and the go-to folks for learning about foreign policy issues. This all of our resources are written by current and former classroom teachers. I actually have been assured by the person who wrote this one that he's hard at work creating a AP Comparative Gov FRQ that's going to accompany this one as well. So look for that soon. That's something we'll be sharing in our newsletter and stuff as we share out every week. So there's this film. I think, as someone who for a long time I taught a modern U.S. history course, I loved teaching about the Cold War. And this film absolutely fits there. I think, as Charlie mentioned at the top, learning about China and China-U.S. relations can fit in a number of different places. Here, I think some of the other places that this film might have a fit, or some other resources you can find to fit alongside it. We have some great Cold War resources, including a global Cold War collection and a Cold War in Latin America collection. As I'll share this out, these are hyperlinked. It'll bring you right to those collections, although they're also pretty easy to find here on the homepage. If we click on collections, we can go through and go click on the Global Cold War collection. Here we start with one about the Berlin airlift. This would be a great one to precede this film about the Korean War. I also think this one about the Korean War is a great fit for civics and government courses as well, because it talks about the power of the president, sort of changing the way that we wage war in this country. Instead of actually getting Congress to declare war, we go another route and have essentially from the Korean War on. So a ton of different things here. Some great stuff to teach about the Cold War. This China film is going to be added to this collection yet this week as well. Along with that, we've got some great interactive resources. We have an interactive map looking at the Cold War in Latin America. With some of our Latin America stuff, we've got ready-to-use templates if you want to do hexagonal thinking activities, where students sort of place key terms, ideas, events next to each other and sort of annotate for themselves, here are the connections that I can make between key ideas in this lesson or in this unit. We actually, for our Cold War resources, we have a digital breakout room, that activity for students as well, which is really cool. So we've got some great stuff for teaching about the Cold War. And I'm guessing for a lot of folks teaching U.S. history, you're right about to hit that time period. So hopefully you'll check out some of the resources from Retro Report. A couple others that I think fit into this vein of looking at issues of diplomacy, either presidential decision making or as Charlie mentioned, they have some great resources for United Nations simulations, things like that. Here we've got two films that I think fit well there. One, looking at the ozone layer. As a child of the 80s and early 90s, I feel like I was beaten over the head constantly about the problem with the hole in the ozone layer. One of the things I love about this film is this is one of relatively few examples where international cooperation has actually led to an environmental achievement. It's a success story. right? And so here, there's one of the lessons. There's a great cabinet simulation looking at a proposal before the United Nations about what to do about plastics in the ocean, where students sort of use the ozone layer story as sort of the backstory about this to figure out what should we do about this issue. Another one here looking at, as you get towards the end of the year teaching U.S. history, looking at how this post 9/11 response and the war in Afghanistan leads us to a 20-year-long conflict, which ended within the lifetime of your students. We are now all too old that it's not within the beginning of that is not within the lifetime of your students, but certainly the ending of it is. So here it has students analyze some key events during that 20-year period and then evaluate whether or not the United States was sort of right to withdraw from Afghanistan. Did we take the right path? So some great things here, I think, that sort of connect, whether you're teaching, about connections to current events, teaching about diplomacy, teaching about the Cold War. There's a ton of entry points here for teachers to use some great resources. We also, as I showed you, have a ton of different collections. I know as people were introducing themselves, we have a ton of AP teachers, whether it's AP Gov or APUSH or Human Geography. We have ready to go. I'll show you those collections where we actually have sort of unit by unit laid out what Retro Report films fit in those. So if we're looking at something like AP Gov, we can click there and see, across units 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, what are the films that fit within those units, and how might we use them? So with that, I'll sort of end here. I know we're going to open it up for questions, see what things folks are looking for, maybe beyond what we've shared, or questions about the resources we've shared. But the last plug I'll give here, again, like Charlie mentioned with CFR Education, I will only send you one email a week at Retro Report, because I know if I send you more than that, you're not going to read it. So we try to keep it nice and concise on Monday mornings, tell you what resources are new, upcoming professional development, new lessons, new films, all of those sorts of things. So thank you so much for spending time with me this evening. Charlie, I'll turn it back to you as we open it up for questions.
And I'll say David writes a great newsletter. Our team writes a good one too, but I enjoy reading David's as well. So yeah, so please do hit that Q&A button. There are questions that you want to ask us, want to hear more about things. There's different topics you want to know what we've got. Yeah, we've got one here right now. How can teachers learn more about how to teach U.S. China relations or other global issues? I can suggest a couple of things, but David may have ideas as well. I think we certainly at CFR Education, a lot of our resources we write with students in mind. But I know we have a lot of teachers who read our stuff too for their own knowledge. My boss is fond of telling the story. She has a friend who was a former editor at Newsweek. And when we first sort of launched our website 4 or 5 years ago, she sent it to him. Said, "Oh, what do you think? What do you think?" He said, "This is great. Like when I was editor of Newsweek, I sort of had to know everything. But there were always like these things I couldn't remember. And I would have killed to have this primer on monetary policy and how it worked, because I was just never an economist, but I'd have to talk to someone who was. And like, this is so great for me." And so I would say as teachers, like, don't be afraid of, being one reading ahead of your students, if that's what you need, because we all went to college and majored in something, and then we became high school teachers and we have to teach 10 different things, and that's just how it goes. And you're teaching things that you never went to school for yourself, because that's what the registrar needed you to teach this year. And so all those things that are great for our students, that they're short, they're bite-sized, are also great for that teacher when it's 10 o'clock the night before and you're like, gosh, I just can't remember this key point. Let me read up quickly. The other thing I'll say is we have recordings of a lot of our professional development on our website. So if you go to the events page, you can find a recording of something we did with Retro Report a year ago. But you can also find, we did a great session a few months ago about how to teach current events in the classroom. It is a really good one to take a look at. Different approaches for teaching, using our resources to talk about international history. So I think there's some good stuff there. And if you follow our newsletter, we certainly talk about stuff. And thank you, my colleague Logan has just dropped the link to our events page, so you can check that out. But yeah, David, what else would you think about?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of using current events in the classroom, not only as a way to build up news and media literacy skills amongst your students, but in my experience, it always pays dividends in terms of connecting back to your content, right? There are always going to be ways. It might not be like one for one every day, but there are always going to be places where the things you talk about in the news can become clear touch points for what you're studying in history, geography, government, psychology, all of those things. I think the question asks, how do we teach U.S. China relations? And I do think making sure students have a historical understanding is essential, right? I don't think you can understand U.S. China relations without understanding sort of the beginnings of the Cold War, U.S. relations with the Soviet Union, and how this pivot to China is integral to that conflict. I think there is so much surface level conversation about like what a threat China is to the United States today, whether it's economically, militarily, informationally. Certainly, 99% of your students have an opinion about a Chinese-owned company where they get the majority of their social media, right? These are definitely things that students are interested in and want to know about. You got to know a little bit of the history in order to understand like why the United States might say we need to ban TikTok in this country, right? Those you can't have one without the other, right? So I do also think, understanding, Charlie mentioned some of the great resources at CFR Education for understanding sort of China's current role in the world. I think this is one of the things that we're going to talk about a lot in the next couple years, as if the U.S. continues to sort of pull back on things like foreign aid, and how that's counterbalanced by China's Belt and Road Initiative and things like that. Sort of the place of the U.S. in the world and the place of China in the world. I think we're at a point where things are going to change over the next few years. So understanding where we are in this moment and where we've come from historically, I think will be essential for students to, be literate global citizens from here on out. It was a very long-winded answer to that question.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned the TikTok issue. When we started planning this maybe a month ago, I was thinking, oh, maybe I'll talk about TikTok because we have a TikTok simulation, which I just dropped the link to. Should the United States ban TikTok? And then as we got close to the event, it's like, well, I think we've kind of decided that. It is still in our library though. So if that's something you're interested in, kind of replaying that decision, or series of decisions, Congress said one thing and then the Biden administration said something else and the Trump administration said something else. You're interested in kind of replaying that with your students. That simulation is in our library as well. It's a really good one. It's just this problem we keep having with our simulations that like we come up with something that we think is sort of likely to happen in the near future, and then it does. And then we sort of have to either rewrite it or kind of let it go. because now we know the answer to what's going to happen.
Charlie, one of
So,
the questions that showed up in the chat asks if either of us have resources that expand the perspectives for all of the AP CompGov countries.
mhm.
And the example that Elliot used was the U.S., Russia, and China on climate change. I can throw a couple links in the chat. I don't have anything on that specifically. We do have some things. Certainly, I can share the direct link for the ozone film and lesson. We have some great environmental education resources. Another one we have that fits well in AP CompGov that we actually have some specific AP CompGov lessons for looks at the Iranian coup in 1953 and sort of U.S.-Iran relations. So I can share that one as well. I actually think, Charlie, that's what we did our last webinar on, wasn't it? We shared that when we were on with you guys talking about issues of diplomacy.
Yeah, it's like tools of diplomacy, I think it was. Yeah. I likewise, we have stuff about a number of the AP CompGov countries. It varies. China's the one we have the most about for sure. But we have some stuff about Russia, a couple things about Iran. Mainly, I'm just vamping until I can find the link that I want to share with you. Anyway, yeah, we do have a few things. I don't know much about Britain. I guess we have a bit about Brexit. So if I'm remembering my AP CompGov countries right, it's been a while since I've looked at that course. But yeah, we have a few things there. Again, I think the search tool is your friend for on our website for that stuff for sure, for sure. Um, yeah, we have an anonymous question from the Q&A. It's nothing salacious about it. But do you have any resources about the South China Sea? I know for us, absolutely. Because actually, this is the simulation I was in my opening slide. We call it. Oops, that's the wrong link. I apologize. What we call it cyber clash. Cyber clash with China because it does have an element of hacking of state on state cyber crime, cyber attacks. But it also has quite a bit about the South China Sea in it. That's one of our extended simulations. Is probably a couple 2-3 day project based experience, which is great if you have 2 or 3 days to do. And students, go through, they do some reading, they do a little bit of research, they write a position paper, they come in, they discuss, they reflect at the end. Some really good stuff. There also is that really great map about the South China Sea, and there's a short section about South China Sea in the reading that I was featuring earlier about sort of the history of the Chinese Communist Party and their foreign policy. So yeah.
And it looks like Ronnie has shared your climate
Yep.
change resources. Yeah, you guys have a ton of wonderful resources.
Yeah, that's right. There was a question. The question about AP CompGov was also asking about climate. So we do have. I don't know. It's about Russia, China, and the U.S. specifically, but we do have quite a bit of the climate framework and yeah, that ozone film looks really cool that you just posted.
Andrew asked me a question. Says you mentioned someone was working and building a retro report lesson resources designed for AP. So we do have, and I can show you the collections or put some of those collections again for AP courses. We do have sort of aligned to 6 different AP courses, unit by unit, sort of which retro report films fit. We do also, folks who write lessons for us, create lessons or FRQs or essays or things like that that are specifically aligned to particular AP courses. AP Gov is the place we have the most. I think we probably have 20 different AP Gov FRQs available. But yeah, so with this one, we don't have a ton of stuff for CompGov, but we will have a new CompGov FRQ that goes with this China film that we saw.
All right. Another question from Elsa. Do you have anything about Greenland? An intriguing case in the news right now. David, do you guys have anything about Greenland?
We do not.
Yeah.
unfortunately.
I'm afraid we don't have anything about Greenland per se either, but what we do have is a bit about sort of Arctic policy generally. And we have a great mini simulation, so similar to that Taiwan one we were looking at earlier, same format, but about what should U.S. Arctic policy be. So it doesn't particularly talk about the history of Greenland or why Trump is excited about it, but it talks generally about why are U.S. interests focused on the far north, which is very applicable to what's going on in Greenland. And so I think could be a great opportunity to grab a current piece of news, from the last week or so, and then pair it with maybe this mini simulation to kind of get at the underlying concepts. And students should be able to very quickly draw those connections about
Yeah.
trade and national security and opening trade routes and all kinds of things.
It's also a great place, as someone who sort of always thinking of, okay, how can we make this current events connected, right? If you're teaching about U.S. colonialism, right, sort of turn of the century, you know, issues with Hawaii or the Philippines or Cuba, Puerto Rico, any of those sorts of things, right? Teach the history there and then connect it to, well, what should we do now, right? How do current debates about colonialism or acquiring territories, how are they similar or different to when the United States annexed Hawaii, right? I think there's some great ways there to make your students see that, yeah, these, like, we've faced questions like this in the past, and we can use history to inform how we view things happening in our world today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think history can be a great way to talk about current events, provides context. Also, really useful if parents or administrators are uncomfortable with you talking about current events. Don't talk about current events, talk about history and let the students make the connection to current events all by themselves. Be a great tip. So, um, any other questions before we hit the top of the hour and send everybody off to eat some dinner?
So Charlie, do you want to remind folks here as we wrap up what they should
Yes.
expect and what the next steps are?
Yeah. So as I mentioned at the top, you will get an email tomorrow, which has links, slides, a lot of the things that we shared tonight. It will also have a survey. So we'd love to hear what you thought of this hour with us. We've enjoyed having you. And if you would like to have a certificate of attendance, please be sure to fill out that survey and then check the box that says, I would like a certificate of attendance, and you will get one. And then yeah, and then as we said, check out CFR Education. You head to our website, education.cfr.org. You can sign up for our newsletter, follow us on social media. Love to hear from you if you have questions or need support with anything. I'm sure likewise for Retro Report.
Absolutely. Thanks to everyone who joined us this evening. Again, look for that info from Charlie, and we hope you leave here tonight with some ready-to-use resources in your classroom and stay connected to these two wonderful organizations.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.